All right, you can hear the bell in the background. It's just the perfect way to start this podcast.
It tolls
Welcome.
for thee.
That's right. Ghosts in the Machine, the haunting power of AI. And everybody is in a dark, haunting mood. You can see John's ready for it. Welcome, Jim. And of course, we have Caroline join us for this particular session. So it's going to be a interesting one, considering it's Halloween and we're looking at doom and gloom. Welcome, John. Good to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Caroline, you were with us last session, and we had a great discussion with yourself, myself, and Jim. And it's Halloween evening. How do you feel about the whole ghosts in the machines and haunting power of AI?
The haunting power of AI. I guess I'm not so much haunted by AI as I am humans' reaction to it. And I'm happy to elaborate on that, but that's how I want to kick it off.
All right, Jim.
Well, AI is going to is here to stay, and it's going to be an influence one way or another. I think it's going to be a big influence in many different sectors. Maybe not as huge and fast as some technology wizards think, but it has the potential for providing problems, and we just must be aware of what they may be.
All right. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the FII conference that happened earlier on, just a week or two ago, or was it this week? And
we'll get today.
It was today, right? So we'll just get thoughts from the perspectives of AI from Elon Musk, and we'll share this, and then we'll go into some of our thoughts from the panel. So the question was, how does he see the pace of AI accelerating and his predictions on doom and gloom?
Every year, which is, let's say it's, 4 years from now, that would mean 10,000 times better. So maybe 100,000. Yeah. And it I think it will be able to do anything that any human can do. Possibly within the next year or two, and then that's what can how much longer than that does it take to be able to do what all humans can do combined? I think not long, probably only, I don't know, 3 years from that point. So it like 2029 is 28, something like that.
The other conversation we've had, and you came out on the same side as Jeffrey Hinton in this, was 80% probability it's going to be awesome. 20% probability we're screwed. Are you still on those odds?
Yeah, I mean, one could say it's most likely going to be great, and there's some chance, which could be 10 to 20%, that it goes bad. The chance is not zero that it goes bad, but overall, one could say that the cup is 80% full is one positive way to look at it, maybe 90%.
So what do we all think? John, is that what we should be thinking about? You think is?
I mean, these numbers. First of all, these numbers are just made up, right? So like 80-20, like this is not based on any actual theory of anything. These are just numbers that people are throwing out. Here's my overall take on AI. First of all, it's mostly math, and it's mostly calculus, actually. And look at all the things that calculus achieved for us as a civilization. So a few hundred years ago, calculus was developed, and pretty much if you look around your room, there's nothing even present around you that didn't come about through some knowledge of calculus. So it's been transformative for us, and AI, which is built on linear algebra and really, really big numbers of variables within calculus is going to be even more transformative, probably in a order of magnitude more so. So the benefit to us is massive. So put me in that 80% category, but again, I don't think 80% is the number. I think it's probably quite a bit larger than that. The reality of all technological innovation, though, is it can be used for good or evil. Like, so just in my example I just gave, like, the atom bomb wouldn't exist without calculus either. Like, I just don't think we can be regulating math, right? So we're talking about regulating math and big matrix calculations. So that's not going to happen. We're not going to get all the countries of the world to agree on it. You try to regulate it out, and all that's going to happen is the countries that are probably the ones that you don't want developing and innovating around this technology become the only places where that innovation continues. So I'm a big fan of us here in the United States. I think we're leading the way on a lot of technological innovation around AI. I think that's going to continue. I think there's other centers around the world that are doing lots of innovation too. And we're going to cure diseases with it. We're going to solve energy problems with it. We're going to solve big chunks of the climate crisis with it. So if I look at existential risks overall that we have as a species, there are far more ways we have to solve those existential risks through artificial intelligence versus any possibility that AI itself becomes the major existential risk. And if you look at, I'll post it in a moment, but I wrote this article, I think almost 2 years ago now, about actual existential risks ranging from global nuclear war to asteroid collisions and global pandemics. Those are actual things that you could actually see happening if things went a particular way. And AI actually has a role in helping with all of those, like even nuclear war, in the sense of AI can be very good at helping people understand complicated social dynamics and diplomatic circumstances. Like, it'll actually be a tool that diplomats will be using in the future to help them figure out how to communicate and achieve better results with the other side in disputes. That could be something that would diffuse war in the future. And that's just one example. But I think AI has pretty good solutions in front of us for everything other than gamma ray burst. I don't know what we could do about a gamma ray burst if that happens. But other than that, like AI will play a role in all of that. And the Terminator scenarios, that's just people's imaginations running wild with science fiction.
Well, Elon, talked today about the Optimus robot, and he was talking also about how that would really populate the world in a handful of years. In 25 years, there may be more Optimus robots than people. And they'll be doing all kinds of stuff for us. So there's a thread of truth there. I mean, we're moving in the era of AI robotically that is going to be very beneficial. It's going to be tremendous. In fact, I was just talking to my wife by saying the next car we should get should be a self-driving car. So that can take me to the airport and then come home. And let it fight the traffic. So she wasn't very happy about that, but those are things that are coming our way where we'll have to make decisions and either embrace them or not. And we should be embracing them in a way that benefits our life, benefits society. Those are the things that will win out.
Jim, just to follow on the self-driving car. So I actually drive a self-driving car. I have a Tesla Model S that's upgraded to the software that's full self-driving, so I can literally put it in from my driveway, take me to the airport. Now, it's not legal for me to then tell it to go home without me. I have to be present in the vehicle, but it would pretty much be capable of doing that if the regulation allowed for it.
Yeah.
But I will say
Get rid
this.
of parking lots. We'll be using that kind of transportation all over the place, and perhaps by in our lifetime or later.
I will say this about Elon's optimism around like exceeding humans in the next year or two. or more Optimuses than humans. Like, I bought that car in 2016 and was told that I'd have full self-driving in a year or two, and it only
Right.
came about earlier this year. I think they do amazing work over there at Tesla. I also own some SpaceX stock, and full disclosure, so consider me someone who believes in some of this bold vision of creating things. But the timelines have been consistently very, very optimistic. I do think that there is that machines could exceed humans in every respect down the road, though. I think that's a real possibility, but at least in their computational ability, just like they already do calculus better than a human, they'll do a lot of intellectual processes better than humans. But we're all tied up in, as a society, as like our worth is equivalent to like us as economic actors. And maybe we'll go through a different kind of, more like a Star Trek kind of phase here, where our economic output as individuals will become less important, and it'll be more about adventure and exploration and experience and doing things as a society. So I'm not afraid of that, is what I'm saying.
Caroline, if you've had two perspectives there. I've shown you Elon's views. I've shown you iRobot movie views, where all these things are running out. But what's your perspective? Because as we talked about it earlier, you're an information scientist. You like to look into things from a perspective of real research and what's behind it. What's your opinion on AI turning all evil and crazy, but also on the other side, where you think it may be positive?
I have several thoughts. Yes, I am a trained information scientist, and I specialize in information literacy. And I very strongly believe in what's called the Sagan standard, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I encourage everyone watching and listening to this episode to watch the full video, the full interview with Peter Diamandis, and listen to what Musk says regarding what he thinks is the bigger existential threat to humankind, which is the precipitous drop in the birth rate. He says that up front at the very top of the video. Even bigger than, he says, yes, AI is an existential threat to humanity, but a bigger one is the drop in the birth rate. And then he goes on to, he said he queried an AI tool and something about what's a bigger existential threat, thermonuclear war or misgendering Caitlyn Jenner. And the AI responded with, oh, it's misgendering Caitlyn Jenner. And Musk completely debunks the whole thing, tears it apart, and says why the AI is wrong. But then if you go on, you realize that he's investing millions of dollars in AI technology. So I listened to that entire interview with a real kind of side eye, waiting for the evidence, he's pulling a lot of numbers out of thin air and waiting for, okay, where is he getting this information? Is he generating the data himself? Did he read journal articles? Where is all this coming from? And he fully admits at the very, very top of the video that Diamandis woke him up too early. He had not had his coffee yet, and he was kind of sleepwalking through the interview. Don't take my word for it. Please watch the video. So going back to what I think about this whole AI thing and in the future, I've been in the library business for 35 years. I came in when we were just getting rid of the card catalog, and the OPAC, the online public catalog, was the thing. People were falling all over themselves about this new database where you can look up library books. And I saw multiple technologies come and go. I've seen people get excited about CD-ROMs and zip disks. Really, and the furor over Wikipedia. Oh, Wikipedia is bad. Wikipedia is great. Internet 1.0, Netscape, Internet 2.0, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of these claims about AI being either a panacea or an existential threat, I believe the reality is not even right down the middle. We're not quite sure where that spectrum is of what's going to happen. I was on a call earlier today, an ethical AI call with Yale Eisenstadt, who used to work for Facebook, and she's done a lot of speaking about AI ethics and the consequences of AI systems. And one thing she said was, just because you're a good person, it doesn't mean the technology you develop will be used for good. So it's something that developers need to be aware of. How will us humans as users really take the ball and run with it? And part of my concern is we have these gut reactions, these knee-jerk reactions to transformative technology. Either it's all good or it's all terrible. And it's very polarizing. And what I tell people in my circle is AI, just like any other technology, is a tool that can be adapted for various uses, and we need to look at how people are deploying it, but mostly the decisions they're making around it, the economic decisions, the business decisions, the personnel decisions, the life-changing decisions in like healthcare and security, things like that. So as far as any kind of platitudes around AI, I think not only is the jury out, I don't think they're at all valid on one side or another. It's not the panacea. It's not the savior. And it's not going to be this terrible existential threat. It's how we use it that we need to pay attention to.
Well, you have a number of really good points there. Of course, what we have to recognize is AI has the power to go well beyond anything that we've seen in the past. The concept of a robot that takes in information, synthesizes it, makes decisions from that, and then operates or acts, is going to be a reality. It's going to happen. Our self-driving cars are also providing opportunities now where additional information will be provided to them over the cellular network. So they can see traffic patterns and this and that and pick routes to go where they need to go, and overall have a flow of traffic that's far superior than we're currently, struggling with. So many huge advances in these areas are I think, is indeed right around the corner. I also believe that Elon leans forward way too much. He's very optimistic on many different
Diamandis
things.
even called him out on that in the video.
Yes,
he said,
did.
Often your timelines are very optimistic.
But it's the fascinating aspect about that is to see the thinking and the strategy. Now, the way he talks is a strategy. I think his stock went up after that telecon. Of course, he's concerned about the birth rate because those are consumers. He's a businessman after all. He's not a rocket scientist, not a mathematician. He's
not an engineer.
Not an engineer. But that doesn't mean he hasn't learned things, and he certainly has a philosophy on how to use that knowledge through social media to gain advantage. But
one thing I do want to mention that we saw in the clip when Elon said AI will have in the near future, I forget what prognosticated, in the near future, AI will have the capacity to do just about everything humans can do. And I don't agree with that at all, because what AI and any other machine or tool or technology, there is an absence of empathy, compassion, human interaction,
how do we teach that?
all the nonverbal soft skills and also instinct. People are calling human instinct one of the sixth or seventh sense. And it's that sort of tempering quality, it's that mitigating quality that I would hope stays with the humans who are developing these systems, so they can develop the algorithms to be weighted in a certain way, to watch for bias, to watch for negative outcomes, possible negative outcomes in these systems. So I don't see that machines in general are going to be able to replace humans, because there are things that are uniquely human in all our squishiness and all our messiness and all of our the brain and the heart and the emotion. I don't see that you can build that into a system, but these things I think are critical for the survival of the human race.
Well, Carolyn, I want to play with that idea for a moment. So I completely agree with the notion that we have a unique experience as biological beings, and the brain is embodied and the body is inbrained, and there's a relationship between our physical substance and our biology and how we experience the world. And a machine is probably not going to experience it in quite the same way, although there's probably ways we could simulate quite a bit of that substrate in silicon and get a lot of the same results. But it kind of touches back on this existential risk article I wrote, I guess it was more like 18 months ago. But it's relevant to this first one, actually, around nuclear war, which I'll encourage people to maybe take a look at it. The reason why it's interesting here is when you think about humans and our interactions, and you use the word empathy, like I think a big part of the research being currently done around AI and AI agents that are intended to work with humans actually is to have elements of understanding, empathy, and that comes across in things like diplomatic relationships, which is actually an area of quite a bit of research. Now, I'm not claiming that it experiences empathy in the same way we do, which might be expressed through mirror neurons and sort of an actual visceral reaction or pain that we might have in response to someone else's suffering. But that said, if you look at, for example, there's this interesting work that was done over Meta a couple of years ago. Again, I'm not saying that these machines feel anything, but and this is a game, the game of diplomacy. The game of diplomacy was thought for years as sort of like a game that a computer could not learn to play effectively. Why? Because the social dynamics are complicated. You have to empathize with other players. You have to understand strategy. You have to understand lying and deception really, really well. And you also have to understand how to let your adversary know that you're in it for yourself, but you might have something to offer them that's actually to their benefit, at least in the short term, that would be tempting to them. So, we've gone through this here's just the general trajectory of AI. And we'll just talk about games for a moment. Used to be that people would say, well, you could teach a computer to play chess, but never like a grandmaster. Like you could never beat a Kasparov. Like they just have a certain ability beyond what a computer will learn. Of course, that's
surprise.
True. Deep Blue. And then we're like, okay, that's chess. Like very, very deterministic gameplay ultimately, but not Go. You couldn't ever get Go built on a computer in a way that that a machine could do it, because there's like more positions on a Go board than there are subatomic particles in the universe. Like how could you ever teach a computer to brute force its way through that? And of course, through deep learning methods, now Go plays better than a human, better than the best humans. That said, there's also some edge cases. Humans have actually figured out clever ways to beat that algorithm, but you're just going to retrain these things and beat the humans again. But then you'd say, okay, well, fine, but not something like diplomacy, where you have to actually have conversations and negotiate with the other player and speak English and convince people of things. Well, now diplomacy is a game that computers dominate humans in, as is complicated games with social cues like poker. Computers will dominate humans. So I'm not at all.
John, I want to reflect on something that you're saying. Yeah. And this I just had this insight with diplomacy, as with chess, as with games, there are rules of engagement. Even with geopolitical, I mean, it gets very complicated, yes, but when you enter into these types of negotiations, there is a tradition, there are rules of engagement, there are rules of communication. What happens if there are no rules? I mean, the rules are obliterated, and I mentioned the squishiness of humans. I prefer that word, because humans are complicated, humans are strange, humans are not cut and dried, and it's not just social norms, but there are also cultural mores, values, a moral compass. All of these factors go in, historical trends, religious, philosophical ideas. Putting all of those in to an AI system, sure, you can mimic all of these things when you train the algorithm, when you build the system. You can even mimic compassion, you can mimic empathy, but it doesn't actually feel it because it's a machine. Now, how far you can go down that road, I think it'll be very interesting to see how accurate and how undetectable these systems can be in the future. My concern is, we being humans, we tend to, like I said, we tend to fall into one or two buckets. It's either all good or all terrible. Either we fear it or we completely embrace it. And most humans, as we've seen in the past 25, 30, 50 years, are not all that discerning about their technology. They want to flip a switch. They want to push a button. They want to be able to copy and paste and say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go have a cup of coffee. But what these increasingly complex systems require are more nuanced investigation from the users. And this is my concern. This is what makes AI scary. Happy Halloween. What really concerns me is that the end users, the masses who are kind of jumping onto these systems and who are being affected by these systems, are not really aware. They're not being discerning in their investigation of these systems. I want to hear your thoughts about those.
Okay. Well, so there's a few things to unpack there. I guess I'll start with, I don't believe there's any law of physics that prohibits the idea of a AI system learning empathy, just as an example. So if there's no law of physics that prevents it, then it's probably possible. Maybe it's not possible on Elon's timeline of the next year or two, but maybe in the next 10 or 20 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, we do. I don't know what the exact timeline is, but virtually everything that isn't barred by physics is ultimately solvable through engineering. So I think that we can get there. I'll address your point about like the scary element of AI. The way to counter a lot of what you just described is to put that power in the hands of individual users. So I'm a big proponent of open source AI projects where the weights and the biases and the structure of the model, and even, by the way, like just having weights and biases doesn't communicate the whole model. You have to reveal the entire training methodology.
Yep. It's got to be transparent as well as trustworthy.
Yeah. So I think that's important because the alternative is highly centralized control, where really only a few big companies are going to decide how they're trained, how you use various reinforcement learning with human feedback mechanisms to structure responses according to particular, politics or moral or ethical frameworks. And I have nothing against those companies building their centralized systems. I just don't think that can be the only solution. I admire those companies because they've made such massive investments in this and have really helped innovate. But the real innovation and the real utility of this is when you put individual AI models in the hands of the individual users. So we want C-3PO, right? We don't want talk to the Death Star and it supercomputer sends you back all of your answers, right? You want the AI that works for you. And in that respect, your AI could be shaped and crafted towards the things that you're concerned about. So if you view the world through a particular ethical frame or a religious frame or whatever it is, I don't think it's for any one company to tell you what you should be thinking. I think it's certainly healthy to get exposed to different ways of thinking about the world, and hopefully you converge on something that's evidence-based and experimentally based, and get to something that can actually be proven in reality. That said, it's up to individual humans to figure out how they want to navigate that. So allow them to work with an AI that kind of hopefully allows them to explore those things, but also appreciates and understands the frame of reference that they're having for approaching the world. And they're not wrong for using that because their politics, for example, doesn't fit the specific politics of a centralized AI. And you can only get to that with open source models and the ability for individual users to do that. So I think centralized control, if we want to talk about the scary aspects of this, if we're down to 2 or 3 companies that control all the AI in the world, I am actually scared by that. I feel like that's a cyberpunk future where I'm going to go through security at the borders to countries, and they're going to want to scan my computers for unauthorized AI models that I might be bringing.
Well, what's even scarier is they're going to be scanning your retinas, and somebody with a similar retinal pattern is going to come up. They're going to say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Radoff, we have to arrest you on the spot because you're wanted in, Slovakia for high crimes and misdemeanors," and which is a
even if you're not.
No, it'll be a completely but this is happening already with a lot of these sort of the facial recognition software. It's still buggy, it's still problematic. But John, I'm with you. I also advocate for flattening and decentralizing not just the development, but the deployment and the use of these systems. And this is why I'm so deeply involved in ethical and responsible AI research and looking at what's happening with the legislation and what the guardrails and guidelines are around that. And I think it'll be very exciting if we can get to a point where we all have our own sort of, AI assistant that we can train internally without worrying that our data is being monitored and monetized, that they are truly in-house systems.
Well,
sure. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to point out one thing, that there's a characteristic of humans that we all know about, we don't talk about, and we don't relate it to AI, and that's our ability to be irrational.
Well, that's what I meant by what happens if there are no rules. All the rules of engagement just go out the window. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In particular, you talk about negotiations between countries or space agencies, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there is a process of meeting and discussion. There's already some background material, but if that background material is known that this individual has done a number of irrational things, that makes the negotiation very different than what might be on a more particular way one would negotiate in good faith and quid pro quo. You do this for your benefit, and I've got a benefit out of that. Let's do that then together. So a lot of the space agencies work in that way, but it's because they each make rational decisions. What comes up all the time, the irrational part of making decisions within the space agencies, happens through the budgetary process. In the United States, I have been representing NASA planetary science in many capacities. 40 or more international meetings over my career, and I've cut deals all over the place to the benefit of the United States. But then the United States sometimes through Congress says, no, we're not going to give you money to do that, even though it's to our benefit to do that. That's something absolutely irrational that the system has done to us. And then each of the space agencies for which we have to renege on our earlier promises have to understand that approach, have to recognize and take that into account in terms of the negotiation. And that makes the next set of negotiations even more difficult, because then you have the problem of not being trusted, not being able to stand behind what you say, because you can't manipulate the system that you're in to be able to see the rationale and therefore obtain the funding or support or the kind of approaches one wants to take to be able to move forward. So there is an element of irrationality in many of the things that humans do.
And if I could
that-
just, I want to jump
Yeah,
into that
oh,
because
sure.
we started to talk about, John brought up calculus and math. And the term irrationality means something very specific in mathematics. But when you're
Yes.
talking about human psychology and communication, irrational. So it just occurred to me that one man's irrationality is another man's reasoned logic.
Right.
Follow me. Just bear with me on this, because in your experience, Jim, Congress pumps the brakes on the funding, says, no, we're not going there. We're not doing that. If you ask those Congress people, what was your thinking? Why did you block that? Why did you block that allocation? They'll give you all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
They will say, this is why I did it. They have a reasoned logic behind their irrationality. So it doesn't mean you
Even if
agree
it's
with
flawed.
that reasoned logic.
Even if it's flawed.
Even if it's flawed, even if it's well, that's the thing. It's always flawed. It's always incomplete. I mean, even in our own rock solid reasoned logic, it's always flawed. It's always incomplete. There is no such thing as making a decision with complete information.
Well, with the pervasiveness of AI coming into our future, are we moving into a period where the irrationality will end or be diminished? And part of being human is doing things, at the spur of the moment, maybe a little irrationally, just for the joy of doing those things.
There you go.
Sometimes we call behaviors irrational that are not necessarily irrational, depending on how you.
That's exactly what I said. One man's irrationality is another man's reasoned logic.
Well, if you look at the world of behavioral economics, for example, so forget behavioral economics for a moment. There was always this sort of mystery in economics of if you have people play this thing called the dictator game. So you have this game where you give basically one person $100, and then the other player of the game or the dictator has the $100, and you decide how much you want to give the other player. And if the other player rejects it, you both get zero. So everybody loses. And if they accept it, you both get it. And they play this game with actual money. So they give someone literally $100, and then they're play. So it's not just a simulation. They get money at the end of this. Yeah, if you split it 50-50, everyone takes that deal, obviously. Now, from a rational standpoint, even if the guy gives you $1, even if he gives you 1 penny, that's money you wouldn't have had. So rationally, you should just take it, right? It's found money. Great, you get 99, I get 1. But people don't play that way. There's a threshold. You start giving people I don't know what it was. I can't remember what it was, 10% or less. People are no way, we're both getting 0, and they're willing to.
It's not worth it.
Right.
Well, how do you assign worth?
It's not viewed as fair, and therefore it may look like it's being greedy, but there's another evaluation that goes into that.
Because
it could be modeled
games,
AI.
When you iterate them, if you do it as a one example like that, people will play one way. But in life, we actually iterate things. So what you're always doing is dealing with complex social relationships with people, where punishing them for perceived unfairness means that next time around, they're less likely to be unfair to you. And therefore, it was worth taking the short-term penalty. So there was, a lot of really interesting research out of behavioral economics has looked at these things, but it comes down to group dynamics, and sort of irrational behavior kind of has a rational basis if you kind of look at it in different ways. And the other thought, going back to the earlier discussion, is, people kind of look at emotions, the emotions we have, as being the irrational part, or the feeling part. But actually emotions are very intelligent. Like they're intelligent systems that we have. Like emotions are triggered in our bodies because they're wired up with a lot of complicated systems where you sort of use emotion to go to kind of jump right through a complicated deliberative process, which would otherwise happen up in your neocortex. You just skip all of that and get to a much faster decision through emotion than you would through that. So emotion, while it doesn't always, or maybe even usually, lead you to the right decisions in a wide range of situations, it is an intelligent system. And I'd come back to, you could probably model emotions, maybe not the visceral feeling.
I differentiate emotions from instinct. They have two separate purposes, and they come from two different areas of the brain. One, sometimes you say trust your gut, which is really your instinct, but you have some emotions overlaid on it, and a lot of that is sort of hardwired and comes out of like a survival instinct. And someone with good, we say good instinct, trust your gut, and a lot of that is informed by past experience. So John, what you're talking about is it's a complex mix of hardwiring lizard brain plus socialization in our own culture and society, plus past history, our own experience. So you throw all of that into the Cuisinart, you blend it up, and you dip the ladle in, and that's that causes your reaction to whatever situation you're in. So it's really hard to always perfectly anticipate how somebody is going to react. But I love that. I love the dictator game. I think that's fascinating. I mean, I don't want to hog the conversation, but I do have a question for everybody here. So my question is, AI, artificial intelligence, has been around a long time. It's been around for decades, and it's gone up and down, up. And it was hot 30 years ago, and not so much. It was hot 45 years ago, and not so much. And now it's hot again. It's a hot topic. My question is, what's the point? Because AI, the concept behind it was to automate rote, mundane activities to free up human time and human energy and labor and mental capacity for doing higher order thinking and higher order activities. So, for example, I want an AI to vacuum my floor when it's dirty. I want an AI to go to the grocery store, and because they know that I'm out of milk and bread. So I don't have to worry about that stuff. And John, you mentioned you have a self-driving car. I like driving. I enjoy driving. I love the activity of being behind the wheel and sort of, feeling the power of the engine and controlling the gas and the brake and enjoying a long drive. So what one person considers mundane and lower order, another person might embrace as the time of their life. So my question to everybody here is, okay, at the end of the day, where does all of this artificial intelligence get us? What is the net? Is there a net benefit for humanity writ large and humans individually?
So I think your up and downs are what you actually described in your example. Okay, the up is, hey, I think we can automate building cars. We'll have this machine, it does these welds and free up human time. And then you implement that, and then but now we're moving into an era for which the higher level thinking, it can be a partner in that higher level thinking. It's not just the human supreme, but it's the ability for AI to look at an enormous background that you don't have, that we all operate within an environment based on our background knowledge, and that enables us to make decisions and interact. And now you're going to be interacting with something that has an enormous access to huge amounts of data and background. So when a person walks into a particular area and has this strange feeling, okay, the AI system can kick in and say, this is an area of the city for which most crimes occur because of these characteristics that are around you. and at time of day, lighting situation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I would recommend you get the heck out of there. So, but that's based on an enormous amount of input. And so now I think the level of interaction is becoming more peer-like.
So a couple of interesting things, though, about the earlier comment, like it was supposed to free us to do boring tasks, like I suppose vacuuming the floor or something like that.
I better get a robot. I haven't done that in this office in quite a while.
And admittedly, some people love vacuuming. That's like
Sure.
the highlight. No, really, that's the highlight of their day. That's the physicality of it and the sense of completion. That is not a lower order task. That's high. But that was the kind of the thinking around artificial intelligence. It's going to free us up for higher order.
There's a lot of evidence around using your hands is actually very gratifying. So just doing those tasks is good for your mental health. But I think we had a lot of assumptions about human intelligence and what was hard within our intelligence. And one of those assumptions was that our language abilities were extraordinary because we don't see the same kind of language abilities in other species. There is a little bit of language aspects in like dolphins and a few other places. So there's a little bit, but obviously not at the level of humans. So I think we've operated for a long time that was super special, and computers would not be able to express a human-like level of creativity around something like language. And then we look at other tasks like just moving around the environment is the easy part because we can see cats and mice and insects all doing that, and they seem to do it really, really well and automatically, right, without even having to learn anything. But it might be that we had it completely wrong, like that language is actually sort of a specific innovation that humans have, but maybe it's not all that complicated when you get down to it. And it's moving around physical environments that's super complicated. Our brain has this part called the cerebellum, which is actually got 3.6 times the number of neurons as our neocortex. So the neocortex is where we're doing all this complicated intellectual thinking. And it's this old part of the brain that's the cerebellum that deals with how to kind of train you towards motor skills. And when you think about this thing people call muscle memory, it's not really muscle memory, it's cerebellum memories. The cerebellum learns how to shoot a basket or drive a car or ride a bike, and it never forgets it. It's really good, right? And yeah, exactly. All of these things. So lots and lots of animals have structures in their brains for navigating physical environments, for learning how to interact with them. And our brains are also sort of reflections of the physical environment that we're in. So, gravity, for example, is a reality of our environment. So our brains evolved in a certain way to cope with the existence of gravity, and it kind of plays into the way we interact with the environment and the way our brain works and the way these motor skills are developed over time. Turns out that stuff's really, really hard, right? We've been working on robots that can walk around and do things in human-like environments for quite some time, and we're getting, admittedly, a lot closer now with things like Optimus and some other robot companies, and I won't be surprised to see them be at a human level of competency in the not too far future. But it turned out that problem was really, really hard. So yeah, and we get Roombas and stuff that vacuum our floors, but like not really well. And not if I've got like a stair step in the way, or like something is dropped on the floor in its way, like all that stuff.
Or a cat that's trying to play with it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think we have to revisit as a species, like, what was the stuff that was special? Maybe it's the earlier stuff you were talking about, empathy and the ability to physicalize the way we feel things and experience the world is what's special about us. And we should just do a lot more of that. And we should experience the world. And hopefully the benefit of AI is that it frees us as economic actors so we can experience the world and explore and adventure and experience all that life has to offer. That's what AI will do for us.
See, that's my utopian future, not dystopian. I think that would be wonderful.
I want to add. Sorry, Jim, go on.
No, go ahead. I was just going to point out, because it's Halloween and we talked about the good and the bad. Wasim, you and I have kind of created a little script here on what might be Halloween of the future.
Yeah, so I'm going to play a video. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to put the audio in yet, but this is the starting of it. So we'll complete the project, and I'll play the full song even once it's done. Let me just show you the interaction. So Jimmy hasn't got the interaction yet, but it just shows you what's possible. So this was generated by AI. We created a song for it, which I'll play in full because it's not fully extended. But just to say, I mean, this only took minutes. It's going to take longer to edit and so on with the script, but just that whole scene there. There's more to come, but it just shows you what's possible. And I know we've talked
So
about
if I
some
could add a narrative
Yeah.
on top of you've got the AI robot in front of the house on Halloween night, and it's got the basket of candy, right? And then in the other basket, it's got like vegetables. Okay. Kid comes up, teenager, human, approaches, trick or treat, and holds out the bag. The AI has a blood sugar detector in it, and they can detect. Because Wasim, you're a pharmacist, and there's a blood sugar detector, and it detects the blood sugar level in the A1C of the kid that's holding the basket. And if it detects an A1C over 5.8 or 6.0, it gives them a vegetable.
I'd be like, I'm never going to that house again as a kid.
Yeah, I
think
thought
about
it was
it.
going to steal their candy.
No, yeah, but think about it. And the parents are like, oh, I better get my kid to the doctor. So there are
happens
pros
the
and
next
cons
day,
to
by
this
the way.
AI thing. So is that dystopian or is that utopian or is that just completely fantasy?
Well, here's the thing with if we want to use the trick-or-treating example, you could program a robot to go trick-or-treating, but you couldn't have a robot replace you having the experience of trick-or-treating.
Right.
Exactly.
No, I agree.
And in fact, that robot could knock on your door, and if indeed you open the door and you see it, and it's in its robot costume, okay, and it will take all your candy and go to the next house.
Exactly.
Well, John, last week we did a demonstration with what even the voice control does with some of the updates that the OpenAI voice-based models demonstrated. I wanted to show you something here. Whilst you were talking, I was working on this in the background. Just give me a second. There we go. So previously I'd created a space game whilst you guys were there just to see how quickly we can do it. But this is a form that I wanted to demonstrate. So the form was created for a service we do in the UK called Pharmacy First. And, it goes through all the details that I would need on a form. And when you're talking to, for example, or you have a vision for how you want your website to be or how you want a particular service to be run. I mean, now, without any coding, I can just go on there and tell it specifically what. So all I said is create a form for Pharmacy First services. Straight away, it's picked up. Right, needs a name, needs a date of birth, NHS number. What the complaint is, what are the clinical red flags, and submit assessment. I mean, we can actually take part in that creative process and knowing as a clinician what we would want for the service to deliver, but also what we want the patient to experience. I mean, these are just some of the things that accelerate how we can use the technology. So one of the questions for me always that I look at is, okay, let's say all this happens the way we think it does. We have access to all this technology. How can we improve or accelerate things that we already have going? And I for one, think it can have a massive impact. Just for example, what I've just showed you, something very simple, right? But normally you would speak to a web developer and tell him, I want a form, and then he'll contact you back. Do you want it to look like this? And do you want the UI and UX to be like this? Now I can just go say, look, this is what I'm looking for. This is the kind of functionality I want. And that's all possible. And these are just some of the tools I see. In fact, I was speaking to somebody from one of the big four accounting organizations in the UK, who she previously worked at Deloitte, and I asked her, well, what does it mean in terms of instructional design and learning, and what does that mean practically? Do we need courses anymore? And if we do, what does the program look like? And so I think there's all this knowledge part that we can all participate in. I see that as something that all of we're all creators, so the creators economy becomes even more powerful, because so many of us are actually having our say in that. But finally, I mean, if you're a sci-fi fantasy book reader like I am, and you love reading books and you like the imagination, and you're like, you know what? When I look at that thing in Game of Thrones, I know George R. R. Martin is who he is, but I would have liked that scene to be that way. I can actually go create that now. And John and Jim, we talked about being able to verbally speak and that world being created. I mean, that for me means that the skills that we've looked at and what we should be looking at will mean that humans will now take a more front end role in what I call movie producing. And I don't just mean that for production of movies, but what I mean is, how do you want your service to be? How do you want your product to be? How do you want your company to be? That's where I think it's going to get more important. So for me, AI allows that potential, but those who don't catch on to that are people who will fall behind.
I think that AI will lead to lots of new ways of expressing yourself creatively. It'll also be sort of less creative for certain things, but it might be fine for even in those situations. But sure, you're going to be able to build whole worlds, and you'll be able to do it virtually instantly. But I thought I'm thinking more about your example earlier of the robot that gives out treats on Halloween and gives out vegetables to the kid with a poor A1C. Sounds totally dystopian to me, but it's a perfect metaphor for the centralized versus the individualized view of AI. So sure, if you want the robots to make all the decisions for you according to how they've been programmed and what they think you should do, then that would be the robot that gives out the vegetable or the treat. The kid who's visiting that house should be the one with their own AI that knows about their health profile already and their A1C and all of their health context around it. And with them and maybe with their parents' input, decides what they should be eating when they get home. But that's individualized AI, something that's actually built around you and your desires and your private data.
Well, healthcare is going, not from the general, you have these symptoms, therefore take this antibiotic, into now more personal healthcare, tailored antibiotics based on your susceptibility, et cetera. In so many different ways. International Space Station has an environment for which we can grow organs. I mean, hearts in particular, that are yours from your stem cells, such that you can then potentially in the future have them replaced and not reject them. So that personalized healthcare is now the big thing. I think personalized AI is actually what I want. Can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I think the sort of the ultimate utility of AI is this decentralization, this flattening of the development and the deployment and the usage, so we can have our own AI assistant and have control over the training data, the corpus of information that goes in, have it secure, and be able to use it, for our own benefit, which is something that John was saying earlier.
Just before we end, we're coming to the top of the hour. John, you weren't here last week, so I got to do this because you're here. So we're just going to do a quick interaction, and just for those of you who are watching, it just shows you how incredible the technology has gone when it comes to some of the things we're able to put together. So if it starts now. some of the interactions we're having with the new versions of upgrades of OpenAI's, for example, using Maple or whatever, we're seeing fantastic results in training clinicians and having live kind of discussions with them related to, what is a pharmacy first service, or how do you diagnose? So I see all these practical elements coming through. And for me, those are the notes also I'd like us to consider is what can you actually do with it? We know what the potential risks are. We know it's accelerating fast, but what is your plan? What are you going to do with the technology? And that's kind of the last thought that I want to leave you all with. Last words from everybody else?
Well, let's let Jim go first because...
Yeah, I've got to take off here soon.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited about the current era that we're in, where more of these practical applications are coming up. Now, granted, the view that Elon espoused may not come in the timescales, but I think those are the kind of things that are on the horizons. Some of the problems that come up are of course, my car is driving me to the airport, but if some country wants to hack all our cars, we could have absolute bedlam. So with AI, we'll also have to come to checks and balances necessary in many different ways to be able to use it appropriately and maintain that kind of service that we want. But I truly think it's just a tremendously exciting era that we're moving into.
AI is going to solve way more problems than it creates. Just put the power in the hands of individuals. That's my take.
And Caroline, last word.
And I guess I have the last word. I see. I'm going to use the P word, potential. I'm taking sort of a sit back, wait and see. This is all very interesting. Let's see where this all goes. Feels like sort of the rough edges and the kinks are being discovered, ironed out, agreed on, and I can't prognosticate. Talk to me in 10 years. Let's see where we are.
With that, enjoy your Halloweens. Thank you, everybody who's watched the session. I can hear the fireworks already going off, at least here. So I'll see if we get any trick-or-treat robots outside. But with that, have a great evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Caroline, thank you so much for coming last week and being here. It's been a fantastic discussion. John, great to see you again. And Jim, as always, a pleasure. With that, good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.